What's up everyone, this is Earl the Rookie Woodworker, and today I'm going to make an Easter decoration. Now Easter is coming up fast, so I need to make an original project that looks good and impresses the girlfriend, but yet keep it simple enough to get it done in a reasonable amount of time. So yeah, let's see how that works out for me. So I'm kicking this project off over here at the planer, where I'm going to mill down some scrap wood to be an inch thick. Yes, this is a scrap wood project, but it'll turn out pretty nice, I promise. And I'll take that nice new flat piece of wood over to the table saw, where I'm going to cut it into strips that are 1 inch wide. So there'll be 1 inch by 1 inch strips. Then over here at the miter saw, I cut those strips into as many 5-inch sections as I possibly can. And it's monotonous, but here we go. Here, I'll speed it up a little faster for you, that way you don't have to go through it for as long as I did. Okay, maybe a little more faster than that. That's better. Now if only I could work this fast. That'd be great, right? Whew, that was a workout. Now before I show you what I'm going to do with all of those, I'm going to go ahead and show you myself laser engraving a bunny face on a blank sheet of plywood. Then at the bandsaw, I took my time to cut it out, being careful not to cut into the black outline. I suppose if you wanted to, you could cut the black outline completely off and it would still be in the shape of a bunny, but for me, I think the black outline adds to the figure of the face. Let me know in the comments below what you would do with this. Would you leave the black outline on it, or would you cut it off? But anyway, after getting the face pretty much completely cut out, I left about a 3-inch wide stick at the bottom of the face. We'll get to why I did that later. And then I'm going to go back to all of those 1 by 1 by 5 pieces that I cut up, and I'm going to put them in squares that overlap each other, which makes an octagon shape. And I'm using wood glue and brad nails to hold all of this together. The first square that I laid on a table, I measured out to be about 10 inches by 10 inches wide. And then the rest of them I just kind of eyeballed up as I'm building up this basket. I'm trying to make sure I think about keeping my hands back with every time I shoot a nail in this thing, because all I'm doing is relying on some luck that these nails don't end up Robin Hooding each other down through this entire basket. And if it hits the other nail, who knows where it decides to turn from there. And then this is where the rabbit will go in the end. And now I'm tracing the bottom for this basket. I'm going to make it so that it attaches to the second layer, so some of the pieces are getting traced on the inside and some of them are getting traced on the outside. And now hopefully whenever I cut this out, it'll fit in there to the second layer like a glove. But we'll see. And there it is. I did add some brad nails to hold it in there. I did not add glue though. I probably should have. I think the brad nails would be good enough. It's just nice to have the extra insurance of a second thing holding it together. Hi there. Now we're getting into the part where we got to start discussing what we're going to put in the basket. And I said I was going to keep this simple, so that would imply that I'm just going to throw some like grass in there and then throw some eggs in there on top of it. And I'm still going to do that, but my brain did this thing where it said let's make it stand out a little more, and it won't let me turn that off in my brain. So I'm going to make these eggs out of epoxy and then put lights inside of them so that they shine at nighttime and light up the face of the Easter bunny, which don't sound simple at all, but that's what we're going to do. Let's do it. Alright, so to start this continue on this journey, we need to make a mold. So what I'm doing here is chopping up this melamine to make a form for that mold. And then I'm going to slap this thing together with some pocket screws then. This is going to be a pretty shallow pour, so I don't expect to see a bunch of forces being applied to the side walls. So I'm not going to do anything special here. Just a couple pocket hole screws on all four sides, and then we'll seal it up with some silicone and get ready to pour. Alright, so now I'm going to glue my eggs to the top here, and that way a little bit stays outside of the mold, and that's going to leave like a flat spot, and then that'll be where I end up putting my LED lights. But I have these little holes in these eggs that I'm going to have to address, or else they're going to take up some of my molding material. So got to seal that off without ruining the shape of the egg somehow. See if I can do it with a hot glue gun. Now before pouring a mold, I need to rub all of the corners with some silicone caulk. That way they're all sealed off and none of my molding material will leak out, which that could be a disaster if that happens. And for my mold, I'm using a 2-to-1 silicone mix. Then it's time to pour those buckets of snot in the form. Nothing too special about this, you just pour them in there. Fill it up pretty close to the top, but not quite to the top. Ideally, whenever you flip this lid over with the eggs mounted on it, that it won't fill up so far that it pushes out the sides. Alright, so what I think is going to happen here is I'm going to pull this top off, and all the eggs are going to pop off the top, stay in the mold, and then I'll just be able to pull each individual egg out of the mold, and we'll have perfect egg-shaped molds there for me to put epoxy in. At least that's what I hope happens, because this could go very wrong. Fingers crossed. I'm going to go ahead and take the sides off and pull the mold out of here. That way it's a little more pliable to be able to get this off the egg the whole way around it, because it kind of sticks to the egg a little bit. So yeah, we got to break that loose before we can get the egg out. Oh yeah, that's perfect. The epoxy I'm using here is a 2-to-1 mixture, so I'm going to mix that up into a bigger bowl before I go pouring it out into some smaller cups, and in those smaller cups is where I'm going to mix some colors into these things. Epoxy is one of those things that I have very limited experience with. I can still count the amount of gallons of epoxy I've used over my lifetime on one hand. So I don't have a lot of experience with this stuff. So this is either going to go in a range from awesome, or it's going to be complete and total trash. So fingers crossed, let's hope for the best, and say a prayer for me. So to mix the colors in these cups, I ended up buying this really cheap, like $3 drink stir to mix these things up. The stirrer was way underpowered and barely got the job done, but it did get the job done. But I think I'm going to look on the market and see if I can find one that has a little bit more power to it. Then after that, it's time to torch some bubbles out, which is my favorite part of this stuff. And from here, it's finally time to start filling up some eggs. And now we're at the moment of truth. It's time to demold these eggs and see how they turned out. Alright, so we have our Easter eggs here, and I wanted to address some things that kind of went a little bit wrong. Not too drastically wrong. The first one being that I did have a little bit of shrinkage as it dried out, so it kind of sunk in a little bit and valleyed in the middle here, which is no big deal because I'm going to be drilling a hole down in that, and it's going to be sitting like this anyway. So, yeah, but it's a little bit unexpected to me, being new at epoxy. I kind of thought that it would dry and be exactly the same size as what it was when you poured it in there, but I guess not. It makes sense though. Another one is these air pockets, which show up really good in these light pink ones, but the air pockets that did not come up around the mold and then out the top, they got kind of trapped down in there. I did hit it with the torch to try to bring them out, but I guess I didn't get enough of them out. Didn't really see that until I demolded them. So I'll try to address that a little more the next time I do this. I did end up deciding to pour another batch of eggs, and I wanted to make a few changes to my process to see if that made a difference in getting the air bubbles to the surface and pop so that they're not in my eggs in the finished piece. But it is a 3-day drying time, and Easter's coming fast, so I'm going to take this time to finish these eggs off with some sanding and some polishing. And the reason I'm doing all of this is to make sure that I use this time to make sure that we're achieving the effect that we're going after here. Alright, so they actually turned out pretty nice. So let's go check on the other batch of eggs and see if they turned out better. Alright, so let's see how this turns out. They look absolutely terrible. Alright, so that's not good at all. So let's go over what we learned here. I did use a more powerful drink mixer, which did put some more bubbles into the mix before I poured the eggs. So right away that puts us deeper into the bubbles hole that we have to try to get out of. Now the other thing I did differently was I took my drill with my mixing paddle and held it against the bottom of the table, creating vibration, which raised bubbles to the surface. And I thought I had some success with that, and then I used the torch to blow them off. Now this stuff does have a working time of about 4 to 6 hours. So I did those steps with the paddle on the drill and blowing the bubbles off about every hour for the first 6 hours that these were drying. And I did get fresh bubbles brought up to the surface every time I did that. And then I blew them off with the torch, did it some more until there wasn't any more bubbles coming up, and then I repeated it again an hour later. I thought this would have been better, but it wasn't. Okay, so back to the basket we go, where I'm going to spray it all down with some lacquer. I'm going to do this about 3 coats at the bottom and the top. Make sure I get everything with it. So then I'll use some brad nails to mount this bunny to this basket, and then we'll get to work on this lighting system. I basically put a false floor in the bottom of the basket, and what that does is cover all the electronics that the lights and stuff are going to go through. Now, the lighting situation is kind of an interesting thing because I couldn't find a nice 8 light system that had like 4 to 6 inch leads leading to the lights so that I could put them in individual eggs and have them spread out nice and neatly. So I ended up having to buy this whole system in parts and piece it together. In short, what this is a battery pack, and the cable coming out of the battery pack has a two-way splitter attached to it. And then that two-way splitter goes to 2 4-way splitters, which gives me my power for 8 lights. And then my lights, they had to be soldered onto female connectors that would work for those splitters. When it comes to mixing and matching electronics like this, I only know about half of what I'm doing here. So I'm not really comfortable with giving you guys a bunch of details on exactly what I did or a bunch of details on exactly what I bought, because it's halfway sketchy for me to be doing this to begin with, and I don't want to be responsible for one of you guys burning your house down. So if you want to do this project exactly the way I did it, feel free to ask me any questions. Just don't ask me questions about the lighting, because you're going to be on your own with that, because I have no business giving you any tips or tricks on that. Alright, so while I was going through the lacquer process, I decided to give it a third try, but I only did it with 2 eggs this time. And what I did different this time was I left the mixture sit in the cup for about 5 hours of the working time. And what that did was it let the bubbles rise to the top of the cup, and then I kept revisiting it with the torch to blow the bubbles out. And it got rid of a lot of the bubbles. These did come out way better. The second one I poured did have a few bubbles around it, right around here. It's hard to see, but you can still see some of the bubbles throughout the middle of the egg. But these are way better. I'd say 95% better. I am going to take another stab at it with a vacuum chamber. I ordered a vacuum chamber that should fit this, but for now I'm going to finish the project, get it done. That way my girlfriend can have it in time for Easter, and then at a later date I will update you guys on Instagram how the 4th try went. Till then, let's finish this thing up. And this is how it turned out. As I was making this project, I wanted to use a block plane and shave off some shavings to use that as a basket filler. But my girlfriend, being that this project was for her, she wanted the old grass basket fillers like you would have in a normal Easter basket as a kid. So that's what we went with here. Personally, I think the wood shavings would have looked better, but I don't know. Let me know in the comments below what you think about that. Would you have gone with wood shavings, or would you have gone with the basket grass like I have here in this picture? But even though I made this way harder on myself than I should have, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I could have easily just went and got the regular plastic eggs like you would use in an Easter egg hunt and just filled the basket with them and not messed with lights, not messed with epoxy or anything like that. And it would have been a pretty decent project. But I am excited with how this turned out. I do plan on visiting the eggs a 4th time. I'm going to use a vacuum chamber and use the technique where I left it sit in a cup for about 5 hours before I poured it into the mold. I will update you on that on Instagram, and maybe I'll even make a YouTube short video out of that later. And also, if you have any suggestions for me at all about how to pour these eggs without having air bubbles in them, let me know in the comments below. I'm all ears at this point, and it would be much appreciated. But as always, if you like that video, do me a favor and hit that like button, and then hit the subscribe button so you can see me struggle through more projects just like this one. Till next time, make something awesome.